So, good evening. My name is Lode. I'm, as Steve was saying, a lead facilitator and one of the co-directors on the Psychedelic Experience Retreats program. It's a real joy to be speaking about some of the work that we've been doing on the program to such a large number of people. And I've got a bit of a challenge because I've only got about 10 minutes, probably 8 now, to talk about what most people often describe as one of the most powerful, significant, transformative experiences of their lives. So bear with me as I try and do it justice. And if you're really curious, I recommend you just sign up to a retreat and check it out for yourself. So I thought I would start with the name, really, Psychedelic Experience Retreat. You might think that it's the most self-explanatory name that we could have come up with. Slightly boring, perhaps even. But I would actually challenge that. Because the retreats are, of course, have psychedelics at their heart, and this is very much why people sign up to the program. But they're about much more than just a psychedelic trip. They are about the human experience. They're about creativity and connectedness. They're about joy, vulnerability, expression. And one of the ways in which we tap into these is, of course, through the psychedelic ceremony itself, but also by weaving in a whole set of practices and activities from journaling and solo silent time to nature connection, meditation, movement-based practices. And all of these practices and activities are very much designed to try and give people an experience of what it could feel like to be alive, to be embodied, to be connected. And so the way that this is facilitated is by dropping into the heart. We live so much of our lives up in our head, and we believe that some of the kind of medicine that we want to bring into this world is about dropping into the heart. And I know this is not a very scientific term, but I also know that every single person in this room deep down knows exactly what I'm talking about when I say the human heart. And what I mean by that is this dimension or this layer of our being that is the seat of profound insight, wisdom, potentially infinite love and compassion, as well as where our own inner healing or inner guidance resides. And accessing actually this level or this layer of our being is very much our birthright as human beings, as well as our highest potential. And sadly, it is so rarely nurtured, to say the least, in our present society and education. And we see, of course, every day on the news and all around us, the danger of having too much head without the heart. We see highly intelligent, highly skilled, highly educated people making decisions without being connected to the heart, and we see the effects of that, and it's rather alarming. So, to go back to the retreat, some terms that are often used to describe the psychedelic experience, and I would argue not just the psychedelic experience itself, but in this context very much the whole experience retreat that people come on, is peak experience. And I suppose the purpose of that is not just having a peak experience for the sake of it, but it's using a peak experience as a way to inquire into what gets in the way of us feeling connected, alive, feeling like our lives are meaningful and having a sense of purpose. And so I would say that there is kind of 3 aspects to the work that we do on the retreat. Of course, that 3 aspects of the psychedelic experiences themselves, and 3 absolutely core aspects of the whole integration journey that is set off by the peak experience. And that's really important to say, is that the psychedelic experience retreat and the psychedelic experience is just the beginning of a journey. We often say to participants before they go home, now the homework begins. And so one of the aspect of this work is, of course, the psychological level. So a lot of the work that we do is about supporting people to take that deep dive within their own psyche, to start recovering the parts of themselves that they've had to chop off, to start accessing emotions that have been suppressed, and work their way through some of the unresolved emotional blockages that often get in their own way. So that's one aspect. And that, of course, has an impact on, I suppose, the second aspect of this work, which is the social and the political level. Because what happens is that people come on the retreat and have an experience of being in the world and being in relation to other that is profoundly different and way more fulfilling than what they've experienced so far. And so when they go back to their lives, there is this experience of actually feeling quite uncomfortable, because the first step, of course, before profound change and transformation is that we need to start noticing what's not quite right, noticing where we're not being authentic, where we're engaging in activities that are harmful to ourselves, to others. And so begins the journey of kind of realigning our lives and the kind of outer conditions in order to meet or match what people have experienced on the retreats. And the third level, of course, is the spiritual level. And I think it's one of my favorite things, really, as a facilitator, and probably one of the most moving experience. We have a lot of people who come on the retreats from very scientific, materialist, atheist backgrounds, and they're coming because they've read the research, and psychedelics have been framed in this very scientific way. And it's so wonderful to see them sort of cracked open to the much vaster mystery that is life and the nature of consciousness and the universe. And very often people report having experiences of, profound interconnectedness, feeling part of a much vaster web of life, experiencing a sense of profound peace and stillness within them, tapping into this infinite well of unconditional love, and just generally having an experience of awareness of their minds, their hearts being this much vaster and mysterious field or dimension of their being. And I think for me this is really the most important, and something that my own teacher always talks about. There's something here that is actually a key to happiness, really, because if we can hold in our minds, in our hearts, not just ourselves, but the whole universe, all sentient beings, all life forms, all ecosystems, suddenly it kind of puts our own lives and our own problems into a different perspective. And it's not to say that suddenly our own lives or our own personal problems don't matter, but it's simply a shift of perspective. And this experience, of realizing that we're not alone to feel so alone. We're not alone in our pain, our grief, our joy, our sorrow. This in itself is such a profound relief and such medicine for the sense of disconnect that is so pervasive in today's world. And so I would say that experience, that kind of expansion of awareness, an expansion of the heart, is really the healing that occurs on the retreat. And so that takes me perhaps to kind of the final point, really, about what do we mean by healing. People often come on the retreat with this real yearning for healing or transformation or something really radical, sometimes kind of looking for a bit of a magic bullet. And for us, healing is not about getting rid of the pain. Rather, it is about cultivating an awareness that is so much vaster, so much greater, that we can actually hold our pain. We can get to know it, understand it, hold it with gentleness and compassion. And if we cultivate this capacity of the human heart, if we train our own capacity to tolerate the intensity of our own emotions, we're way more likely to be able to also tolerate and hold and feel other people's emotions. And This is empathy, and this is what our world so desperately needs. I don't really need, I'm sure, to convince you of how different the world would look if we could all live like this, if we could all be in our hearts more, if we could all train this capacity to put ourselves in another person's shoes or hearts. They have a wonderful word in Tibetan that we translate as compassion, which is ninje. And my teacher always translates it as exchanging one's hearts for another. And how radical is that? So this is kind of it. I mean, yeah, the last point really to make, I'm talking here about the psychological and the spiritual as if they were different things, but really they're not. They're completely interwoven. They work in service of one another. Looking into our own psyche and personal history can lead to profound spiritual insights, and having spiritual insights can have a profound bearing on how we view our own personal history. So they very much work together, and so much of the work we do on the retreats and that we encourage people to follow up with when they go home is about integration of the psychological and the spiritual, integrating these parts of ourselves, integrating the heart into our lives. And so I guess the final thing to say really is that coming on one of these psychedelic experience retreats is a big thing. It's not just about having a trip. It is a commitment to a profound transformation that is both in service of yourself as an individual and really the world. And I'm thinking of the quote by Krishnamurti that says, "It is no measure of health to be well adapted to profoundly sick societies." And if you look at the environment and our political systems, social systems, the ever-deepening mental health crisis, I don't think I'm exaggerating saying that our societies are profoundly sick. And so we need equally powerful medicines in order to tackle these issues. And we believe that psychedelics, in combination with other practices and tools, can very much serve as these medicine. Thank you.